Hello, everyone. This is the Wednesday, November 20th edition of Wednesday with Walton and Newberry, coming to you here in video form at thecardinalnation.com and in audio via the Scoops Sports Network and all your favorite podcast apps. How you doing, Blake?
I'm doing great. All Rule 5 Protection Day is always a fun little deadline in the off season.
That's right. So Tuesday was, as Blake mentioned, Rule 5 Protection Day for not only the St. Louis Cardinals, but all the organizations. And that means that teams had to decide which eligible minor leaguers would get put on the 40-man roster to protect them from the major league phase of the Rule 5 draft, which will occur on December 11th during the winter meetings. And basically, players qualify based on how many years of experience they have. Those that were signed at 18 or younger have 5 years, and then those at 19 and older must be protected within 4 years. And there's some exceptions, but generally that's the case. So those international signees from 2020 and earlier, or high school draft picks, and the college pitchers taken in the 21 draft earlier are the ones that need to be protected for the first time. And it's a bit of a challenge for the ones from 2020 because they didn't really get a chance to play that year. Tink Hence is one guy that we're going to talk about that was in that case, but still they only get that either 5 or 4 years respectively to be protected. So the Cardinals had 4 spots on their 40-man roster coming into the day on Tuesday. They created one extra by outriding Drew Rom, who missed all of 2024 after pitching. I think he made 8 starts with a 7 ERA for the Cardinals at the end of 2023. And so that was not a big surprise, but that gave the Cardinals a little extra room. And when I went through my projections, I thought, well, the Cardinals are going to want to hold a couple of spots available for them to go shopping in the Rule 5 draft, because if the 40-man is full at Rule 5 day, then teams cannot participate in terms of selecting other teams. The Cardinals stopped one short of that. They added 4 players. So 30 minus 36 minus 1 plus 4 is 39. So that's where they are now. So the 4 players that the Cardinals added to the 40-man, 2 of them I would say were pretty much expected. 2 of them were not bad picks at all, but maybe a little bit more of a surprise. Let's start with the 2 pitchers at the top of the list, and that's, of course, Tink Hence and Tekoah Roby, our number 2 and number 4 ranked prospects, respectively. Despite the injuries, we can't question the stuff that Tink Hence has. I know, at least in my case, though, I'm getting kind of impatient as I see Jordan Walker and Mason Wynn, guys that were in his draft class, Alec Burleson, contribute for long periods of time at the major league level, while Tink Hence is still stuck in Double-A. Do I need to show a little more patience with Tink?
Yeah, I think so. I think right now Tink is still just adding the workload to his arm. He's obviously has a little bit of a smaller frame already. So I mean, he could pitch in the majors right now. I have no doubts in my mind that he could be a major league pitcher. The problem is the Cardinals don't want him to be a major league pitcher who's only throwing 1 inning. The Cardinals want him to be a major league pitcher who's throwing 5, 6, 7 innings at a time consistently, preferably closer to the top of the rotation than the bottom. So in order for him to actually take that next step to get there, he's just going to require a little bit more time and a lot more innings. And unfortunately, he's had some injuries, which have really limited his innings count. But hopefully, this is the year where we can really start to see him pitch deeper into games. I know we've been saying that for a few years now, but he's going to be in AAA. He's going to be close to the majors. This is really, if the Cardinals are ever going to take the gloves off and see if he has what it takes to develop into a true major league starter, it feels like this coming season is going to be the time to do it.
Yeah, Hence threw just under 80 innings this last season, missed most of 2 months, but did come back at the end of the year. And was starting to build his workload up again. But he spent now at least a year and a half at Double-A. The Cardinals almost have to challenge Hence, assuming he's healthy in the spring, with AAA, don't they?
Yeah, they absolutely have to. I mean, he's way too good of a pitcher to be in Double-A.
Yeah. Well, and so his Double-A teammate, Tekoah Roby, who we didn't see from, I guess, about Memorial Day until the very end of the season when he threw, I think, 3 1-inning stints a week apart down in the Florida State League with I guess continued shoulder issues. Is Roby a guy that they might have risked leaving unprotected, given his health, or because he was able to pitch at the end of the year, did that make him, a more likely pick for someone to take?
I think if Roby had been left unprotected, the odds are very good that he would have been selected. I think, when you're looking at guys that you're taking in the Rule 5 draft, they obviously have to be able to stick in the majors for a full season. Tekoah Roby has the quality of stuff that you would expect to be able to play well in the majors. Obviously, injury issues, some command issues that have flared up at times, and the stuff took a little bit of a step back. And obviously, some of that was related to the shoulder health and the injury history and things like that. But it looked
Gave up a lot of uncharacteristically a lot of home runs early on.
Yeah, he did. And it would have been nice to see that maybe have the chance to normalize over the course of the season. But I think when teams are looking at Roby and just at pitchers in general in the Rule 5, they're going to see a guy who can sit in the mid 90s, who's going to be pushing the upper 90s consistently if he would be pitching out of the bullpen, which he would be if he would be taken in the Rule 5 draft with a really good curveball, a solid slider. Like he has the pitches to make me think that he could be a successful major league reliever. And I think other teams would see that and would have taken him had he been unprotected.
Yeah, yeah. So Tink Hence, Tekoah Roby, both in Springfield, both on the 40-man, both really, you'd like to see in Memphis this spring, but I said this same thing 12 months ago. So we'll have to see what happens. But they're on the 40-man roster now, so they'll be in big league camp for the first time as a member of the 40-man roster. Now, a guy that didn't get picked, our number 14 ranked prospect, Ian Bedell, reached Memphis, has tremendous promise, but also had injury, didn't pitch until for a period of time in the last month, and then came back again through a little bit at the very end. Is Bedell a guy that could be at risk being taken in Rule 5?
I think he is somewhat at risk. I personally do not expect him to get taken. Obviously, that can change. But he didn't really have a ton of success in AAA or in AA this year. And the stuff is fine. It's not like the kind of explosive stuff. Like the Cardinals, when they went out and got Ryan Fernandez last year, it's a hard fastball with traits that improved and a really good like slider cutter. Ian Bedell doesn't have the same kind of stuff that you could look at it and say, with some tweaks, that's going to play out of the majors right away. So I think Bedell is maybe a guy who could get chosen if a team wants to really, like particularly a team that's not going to be very good next year, if they want to sit him in the majors, try to work on some things and make him like a longer term hold. But I think teams that are really looking to poach guys in the Rule 5 draft are going to be finding guys with better stuff than what Bedell has. So I think he's probably safe.
One of the guys that was protected, Matt Koperniak, is going to be 27 years old soon. A little bit old to reach the 40-man for the first time, but really a great story. A guy undrafted in a year that there weren't only 5 rounds in the draft, so that's kind of a misnomer in a way, I guess. He certainly would have been picked if it had been a 20-round draft. But Koperniak worked his way through the system, did everything well. I was kind of disappointed he didn't get a shot with St. Louis in 2024, and that's really kind of increased for me knowing that they added him to the 40-man now. Now, granted, it's a lot easier to add players to the 40-man roster in the fall after all the free agents leave and there's roster room. But I think Koperniak was a guy that might have been able to help the Cardinals this last year.
Yeah, I agree. It would have been nice to see him get a chance. And I think he made some actually really notable improvements as a hitter and as a prospect specifically. And I think that's really what allowed him to kind of get over the hump and get protected. Whereas I think starting the year, I would not have expected him to have earned his way onto the 40-man. And he did, which major credit to him for doing that. So I think it shows that his improvements were in the Cardinals' eyes real and that they do see a potential place for him in the major leagues at some point within the near future.
And let's face it, the Cardinals' outfield depth is pretty thin
Yep.
depth, I guess you could call it. There isn't much there at the top of the system. So keeping Koperniak around and having him available to be a swing guy is a good idea. And of course, we don't know yet what other roster moves the Cardinals are going to make this winter that could either strengthen or weaken the outfield, depending on which ways they lean.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is one of the weird cases where Koperniak hitting left-handed actually is going to hinder him more than it helps him when it comes to seeing the field. Typically, it's the other way around, but the Cardinals already have so many left-handed hitting outfielders. It's tough for Koperniak. Now, I do think him being able to play all 3 outfield positions does help him a lot because if he is going to come up as a 4th outfielder, there's obviously now 3 potential positions for him to play as opposed to him being just pigeonholed into one. So we'll see if that gets him on the field a little bit more next year. And you're right, the Cardinals could make moves and maybe free up a little bit more playing time for him. So we'll see what happens.
Now, on the other hand, I don't think Koperniak is going to be a starting center fielder, correct? More of a
No.
filling guy because
Yeah.
I think, at least what I'm reading in the Cardinal Nation message board, there's a lot of people interested in the Cardinals trying to figure out some way to improve center field. And I don't think Koperniak is that answer.
Yeah, Koperniak would probably be an offensive improvement in center field, but
Oh, clearly.
the defense is definitely going to be significantly worse than what you would get with a guy like Mike Ciani or Victor Scott, and that probably makes him a worse option out there overall, like as a total package than the other two. So I think he's a guy who you can fill him in center field. You don't want him to be your everyday center fielder. You don't want him really starting a ton of games in center field. It's mostly it's a nice thing to have in his back pocket, but he's more of a corner guy.
Yep. All right, so we've covered Hence, Roby, Koperniak. The fourth member of the St. Louis Cardinals organization that was added to the 40-man roster on Tuesday is Springfield closer Matt Svanson. And folks have heard us talk about Matt for weeks now. Why isn't he in Memphis? He had the opportunity, at least after going 27 for 27 in save opportunities for Springfield, to go down to the Arizona Fall League. And he was very effective, 15 strikeouts against, I think, 2 walks in about 10 innings. But ERA, pushing 6. So it's kind of a mixed bag for Matt Svanson. They pitched him all around. They didn't just pitch him in the 9th inning in his traditional role. Were you surprised to see Matt get added?
I was a little surprised. I was personally expecting the Cardinals to probably protect one of Swanson or Andre Granillo. It seems they chose Matt Swanson, which in my mind tells me that they probably consider Matt Swanson a better prospect than Andre Granillo. So a little bit of a surprise to see him get protected, but I think we could kind of see it coming with the success that he had last year after coming to the Cardinals system this year in his save opportunities, and then being assigned to the Arizona Fall League and pitching well there. I think we could see that as potentially the Cardinals exposing him to maybe a little bit of a higher level of competition against some more top prospect kind of hitters, and seeing him actually have that success might have been, the little push that he needed to actually get himself onto the 40 man.
Right, and teams do that. I think Granillo pitched in the AFL, if I remember correctly, a year ago. And teams look at that with they're on the fence with the guy. Let him pitch against some more advanced competition, you say, and help make that decision for them. And Swanson certainly held his own in the fall league. Granillo, by the way, the fact that Swanson is considered a better prospect than Granillo right now is consistent with our ranking, where we had Swanson 29th and Granillo 37th. And of course, Granillo's big problem is he can't control his stuff.
Yeah, and that is quite a big problem, and it's a problem he's had for quite a while. And I think what's actually really interesting when you look at both of them is they both tend to show pretty large platoon splits, where both of them are much better against right-handers than they are against left-handers, which as relievers, you can maybe, situationally put them in spots where they're mostly going to face righties. Obviously, managers can counter and pinch hit, but I think it's a little bit of a hindrance for them. And I think what might separate Swanson from Granillo in that sense is that when Swanson went to the AFL, he actually debuted a cutter. And the cutter is something that he really wants to break out against lefties in particular. So if he can use that as a pitch to neutralize the left-handed threat against him, he then becomes less platoon splitty and more platoon resistant, and a guy who you can really comfortably use in more situations. I think it's easier to see the cutter helping him take that next step than it is to see Granillo making tweaks to his arsenal to overcome that.
Good point. And, we'll be seeing Swanson likely be in a very, very prominent role in the Memphis bullpen here in 2025. Speaking of inability to control their offerings, another guy that was up for Rule 5 consideration, Edwin Nunez, who this time last year was coming off a great turnaround in the bullpen in Peoria. And of course, we had a surprise this spring that not that he got promoted to Memphis, but that Nunez got put back in the rotation. They gave him basically, most of the season to try to, show that he could start, and it didn't work. It failed badly. And I don't know where Nunez is right now in terms of his career path.
Yeah, neither do I. And I think he's got a couple things he has to get over. And one is being able to just throw strikes consistently. And another is really just trying to fix his pitch shapes a little bit. His fastball is hard. It just doesn't play all that effectively because the shape on it is just not good. It sinks. It finds the barrel way too often. He doesn't just dominate hitters with pure velocity. In order to do so, he'd probably have to push like 100 miles per hour consistently. He's just not there. So I think he's a guy that the Cardinals certainly did not have to protect. Is also nowhere near the majors, so they probably wouldn't want to put him on the 40-man roster anyways. And I don't imagine he's going to interest other teams enough to make them try to work through the variety of issues that he has.
Now, there's a couple of guys that are in our top 25 in the Cardinals system who were unprotected as well, but they're guys that are still in A ball. And, young pitchers that are way down there, probably aren't going to be able to be kept on an active 26-man roster by a team the entire season up ahead, which is what the Rule 5 requirements are. Now, maybe if they were injured, maybe the Cardinals, they could do like what the Cardinals did with Wilking Rodriguez and keep him on the 60-day IL all year. But I'm talking about Darlin Saladin, who pitched very, very well late in his duration with Palm Beach and moved up to Peoria, and Gerardo Salas, who spent the whole year with Palm Beach. Both those guys originally signed in 2019 before COVID, so they're technically eligible for Rule 5, but again, probably not experienced enough to be taken.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I think unless a team wants to do with was it the Padres did like 10 years ago where they just started poaching a bunch of like interesting prospects off the lower levels of the
Luis
system.
Perdomo.
Yeah. So I don't envision other teams doing such a thing. So especially in this day and age, it feels like teams are more so, plucking guys from the top levels of systems who are a little closer to the majors. I think both of those guys have really good fastball traits in particular, and they have a lot of promise as prospects, but it would be a tall order for them to actually be able to stay and be even halfway competent in a major league pitching staff at this point in their careers.
The last guy in our top 50 of the 10 members of our top 50 were Rule 5 eligible. As we said, 4 were protected. The last one, shortstop Jeremy Rivas, who was in the fall league again a year ago, coming out of Peoria, spent the entire year at Springfield, had I think a 94, 96 WRC plus, so didn't quite hit up the level of league, but it's a very good defender at shortstop. But again, it's a big jump to the majors, and it's interesting. The Cardinals haven't used Rivas anywhere but shortstop. Normally they get these guys and they have them play a little second, play a little third. In the case of Rivas, he's only played shortstop so far in his career. And so I'm kind of wondering where he's going to fit in the long-term plan with Mason Wynn obviously entrenched at shortstop.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the fact that the Cardinals have left him at shortstop so far in his career is a testament to how good he is at the position. But there's clearly he's going to run out of runway as he gets closer to the majors. He's not going to supplant Mason Wynn as the starting shortstop. So it's nice to have a guy like that. If the stars align for Jeremy Rivas, he hits better, he makes his way to the majors. It's nice to have a guy who can play a good shortstop, and you can give Mason Wynn days off and still have comfortable defense up the middle. If Mason Wynn gets hurt, you have a guy who can play the position long term. But if Rivas wants to see the field, he's going to, one, have to hit better, and two, increase his versatility. So I would expect him next year and now I think going forward to really get his hands dirty at second base, third base, maybe a little outfield, depending on what the Cardinals want to do. Others probably better situated in the infield, but he's just going to have to add versatility to his game.
Yep, that's right. And likely, he'll be in the shortstop mix at Memphis, but the Cardinals also signed Cuban Jose Barrero to a minor league contract this last week. And Barrero was up with the Reds, I think, 3 or 4 different years. And so he's another guy that, could conceivably play shortstop if they decide to move Rivas around. Have you seen Barrero? Do you have any opinion on him?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting pickup. I mean, he's a former, highly regarded prospect. He's, I think, been a little chase happy, particularly against breaking balls, but he has some good parts about his game. He looks to be a pretty solid defender. Like it's the kind of move that you would like to see a team like the Cardinals make if they're going to do something like a soft reset, to just bring in all these former top prospects who didn't quite pan out and see if you can find a way to make them into like reliable MLB contributors. If you can't, you can't. And they just, sit in AAA and provide valuable depth and a little bit of a more experienced option for that team to actually keep playing. But certainly not a downside of this move. And potentially it gets a little more upside.
Yeah. And, not unlike a Jose Fermin, who was, kind of, again, a fringe major leaguer. But the Cardinals brought in, and they've used him effectively at AAA. Hasn't been as productive in the majors, but he'll be in that mix as well. All right, with that, let us bring our November 20th edition to a close. We've discussed the Rule 5. We've also touched on several of the players who have already appeared. We're in our low 40s now of the Cardinal Nation Top 50 Prospect Countdown. We started at number 50. But if you want to read more about Rivas, you want to read more about Nunez, and most of these other guys will all be coming up in the top 50 in the upcoming weeks, please subscribe to the Cardinal Nation. You can read Blake's scouting report on all these players, and I talk about their backgrounds and their history and sort of where they line up for the future. So the Cardinal Nation Top 50 Prospect unveiling is occurring now. A few of the articles are free, so you can see them and kind of get a feel for what they're about. And please consider joining the Cardinal Nation if you like what you read. and if you like what you hear here at Wednesday with Walton and Newberry. Blake, thanks again for another informative episode, and we'll talk again in 7 days.
Sounds good.
Bye, everyone.